We open with a scene. A man sitting alone at a table, eyes glazed over, lost in thought. His world feels fragmented, weighed down by the constant demands of his mind. He's a successful professional, admired for his work ethic and intelligence. But despite his outward success, there's a gnawing emptiness inside him that he can't shake. He's exhausted, overwhelmed, and unsure of where it all went wrong. This is the shadow, an unseen presence, lurking beneath the surface of our daily lives. Most people ignore it, deny it, or try to outrun it, hoping that it will just disappear if they keep their focus on the light, the achievements, the external validation, the rewards. But what if the shadow is not something to escape, but to embrace? In this opening sequence, we'll explore the idea that the shadow is not inherently dark or dangerous. Instead, it represents parts of us that have been neglected, suppressed, or misunderstood. It could be our fears, our unresolved trauma, or the desires we deem unacceptable. These shadows are not bad. They are simply parts of the whole, neglected in the pursuit of light, in the pursuit of a life that looks perfect from the outside. We contrast the conventional wisdom, that happiness comes from being perfect, from pushing the dark parts of ourselves out of sight. Society tells us to focus on our strengths and achievements, to curate a life that feels polished and curated. But this is an illusion. It's a construct that only serves to reinforce the split between our light and shadow, creating inner conflict and alienation. What if true freedom comes not from running from our shadows, but from integrating them? The darkness isn't to be feared. It's a source of hidden power, wisdom, and authenticity. The conflict lies in the tension between what we are told to pursue, light, perfection, and what we actually need to heal and grow, wholeness, acceptance, and the courage to face the darkness within. By the end of this introduction, we'll establish the central question: can you integrate your shadow without losing the light? This question isn't just philosophical, it's personal. It's about acknowledging the uncomfortable, unknown parts of ourselves and daring to bring them into the light. It's about discovering that the light is not weakened by the shadow but is made richer, fuller, and more authentic through its integration. We leave the audience with a reflective transition line. To walk into the light is not to run from the dark, it is to learn to dance with it. In this section, we will dive deep into the philosophical and psychological themes of the shadow, drawing on the works of Carl Jung, Nietzsche, and other thinkers who explored the depths of the human psyche. The idea of the shadow is not just a psychological concept. It is a reflection of the internal battle that every individual faces when confronted with their own darkness. We begin with Carl Jung's assertion that the shadow is not a malevolent force but a natural part of the human experience. Jung believed that the shadow consists of the traits, behaviors, and emotions that we reject or repress because they don't fit the idealized image we hold of ourselves. In essence, the shadow is a mirror to the parts of ourselves we refuse to see. Jung emphasized that this rejection does not erase these traits. Instead, it pushes them into the unconscious, where they operate outside of our awareness, often causing inner turmoil and projection onto others. The key to inner peace, according to Jung, is not to obliterate the shadow, but to confront and integrate it. This integration process involves acknowledging the shadow's existence and understanding that it holds valuable insights into who we are at our core. The shadow is not something to fear but a necessary counterbalance to our light. Without the shadow, we would become overly identified with our ego, losing touch with the full spectrum of our humanity. Jung warned that failing to integrate the shadow leads to what he called the neurosis of the personality, a fragmentation that manifests as inner conflict, self-doubt, and a sense of alienation from oneself. Drawing from Nietzsche's philosophy, we explore the idea of the will to power and how it relates to the integration of the shadow. Nietzsche believed that the denial of our shadow, our dark, chaotic impulses, leads to a disempowered life, one in which we suppress our true potential. To truly live authentically, he argued, we must embrace our entire being, including the darker aspects of ourselves. The light and shadow are not opposing forces but two sides of the same coin, each contributing to the richness of our existence. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or Overman, embodies this idea, someone who transcends conventional morality by embracing their full humanity, including the shadow. The integration of the shadow, in Nietzsche's view, is essential to achieving personal greatness. As we move through this section, we explore the psychological impact of suppressing the shadow. The more we deny its existence, the more power it gains over us. This unconscious material can manifest in various ways, through projections onto others, through patterns of self-sabotage, or through intense emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to the situation at hand. For example, someone who represses their anger might find themselves lashing out unexpectedly or feeling an intense sense of frustration over minor inconveniences. The shadow, when ignored, tends to emerge in distorted forms, leading to confusion and suffering. We also delve into the idea of splitting, a defense mechanism where we separate the light from the dark, believing that we must be either all good or all bad. This dichotomy is damaging, as it forces us to compartmentalize ourselves, leading to feelings of inauthenticity. In reality, the human experience is far more complex. Our greatness and our flaws are intertwined, and it is only through the acceptance of both that we can achieve true personal growth. The external world plays a significant role in shaping our perception of the shadow. Society, culture, and upbringing often teach us to value certain traits while demonizing others. For example, traits like assertiveness, independence, and ambition are often celebrated, while vulnerability, fear, and dependency are seen as weaknesses. This leads to the internalization of a rigid self-image, where anything that falls outside of this idealized self is repressed. But the shadow is not inherently bad, it is merely the parts of ourselves that do not conform to society's expectations. The pressure to conform to external standards creates a rift within us, pushing us further away from our true selves. In this section, we also reflect on the idea that the shadow often represents the unconscious desires and impulses that we are too afraid to face. These could be desires for power, sexual expression, or creativity, all of which have been stigmatized by societal norms. When we repress these desires, we disconnect from our true passions, which in turn leaves us feeling unfulfilled and lost. To integrate the shadow, we must acknowledge and accept these impulses, understanding that they are part of our vitality and creative energy. Far from being destructive, these energies, when channeled properly, can lead to greater fulfillment and self-expression. Finally, we discuss the psychological mechanism of projection, how we often project our shadow onto others, blaming them for the traits we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. This projection is a defense mechanism that keeps us from confronting our own darkness. For instance, someone who is deeply ashamed of their own anger may perceive others as hostile or aggressive, not recognizing that they are seeing in others what they are unwilling to confront in themselves. By projecting the shadow onto the external world, we avoid the painful task of self-examination, but in doing so, we prolong our suffering. The core of this exploration is the realization that to embrace the shadow is not to become consumed by darkness, but to reclaim lost parts of ourselves. It is about moving beyond dualities, good versus bad, light versus dark, and recognizing that our fullest, most authentic self lies in the acceptance of both. We are not defined solely by our strengths, nor by our weaknesses, but by the integration of the two. We end this section with a powerful question: how can we integrate the shadow without losing our light? The answer lies not in denying the darkness, but in learning to coexist with it, using its wisdom to become whole. Through the integration of the shadow, we do not lose the light. We illuminate the path to a richer, more authentic existence. In this pivotal section, we focus on the emotional breakthrough that comes when we begin to truly integrate our shadow. The journey is no longer theoretical. It becomes personal and transformative. We move from the intellectual understanding of the shadow to its emotional and existential implications. This is where we experience the shift from confusion and resistance to acceptance and growth. The cinematic progression starts with a dramatic emotional shift. Imagine a woman standing on a mountaintop at sunrise, gazing at the horizon. For years, she's been running from her past, from the parts of herself she's afraid to confront. Her mind is filled with self-doubt, the weight of unresolved guilt, and a deep fear of her own darkness. She has spent years striving to be perfect, to fit the image of the person society wants her to be. But now, as she looks out over the vast, empty space before her, she realizes that the perfection she has been chasing is an illusion, a mirage that has led her further from herself. The insight comes slowly at first. The more she tries to avoid her shadow, the more it controls her. It's not the shadow that is the problem, it is her refusal to acknowledge it. By running from it, she has trapped herself in a cage of fear, shame, and guilt. The turning point arrives when she realizes that the shadow is not her enemy. It is her most authentic self trying to break through, urging her to stop denying parts of her being that are essential to her growth. In this moment, she accepts that the darkness she has feared for so long is not something to be ashamed of, but something to embrace. This realization is profound, yet it's not easy. The emotional breakthrough isn't instantaneous. It's a process of peeling away layers of conditioning, of confronting the uncomfortable truths about oneself. It involves moments of stillness, moments where the mind quiets and the heart opens to the possibility of acceptance. Silence is a key element in this process. We explore how silence becomes a space of revelation, a moment where the inner noise that has dominated the person's life for so long finally gives way to clarity. The weight of the emotional burden begins to lift as they begin to see their shadow not as a threat, but as an integral part of their identity. The process of integrating the shadow is like the blending of two contrasting colors on a canvas. At first, the two seem to oppose each other, but as they mix, they create a new, deeper shade, one that embodies both light and darkness. The integration process is not about making the shadow disappear or suppressing it. It's about learning how to coexist with it, understanding that it is not a force to be feared, but a powerful source of energy that can bring new depth to our lives. This section also addresses the necessity of self-compassion in the integration process. It's easy to be harsh with oneself when confronting the darker aspects of our psyche, but true transformation requires kindness and patience. We delve into the importance of forgiving oneself for past mistakes, for the moments when we failed to be the person we thought we should be. It's in these moments of self-forgiveness that we begin to soften the edges of the shadow, bringing it into the light where it can no longer control us through guilt or shame. The breakthrough here is the understanding that integrating the shadow is not about perfecting oneself. It's about becoming whole. Wholeness means accepting that we are not one-dimensional beings. We are complex, multifaceted individuals, capable of experiencing both light and darkness. True power comes from the ability to hold both aspects of ourselves in harmony, without the fear of one overshadowing the other. At this point, we use the story of a man who had long struggled with anger. For years, he repressed his emotions, afraid that showing anger would make him a bad person. He believed that to be a good person, he had to always be calm, patient, and in control. But when he finally allowed himself to express his anger, he realized that it wasn't the anger itself that was destructive, it was the suppression of it. Once he confronted his anger, he was able to channel it into assertiveness, setting healthy boundaries and taking control of his life in ways he never had before. The anger, once a source of shame, became a tool for empowerment. The integration of the shadow is not a one-time event, it is a lifelong process. It involves constant self-awareness and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. However, once we accept the shadow, we find that it no longer holds the same power over us. It becomes a part of our inner landscape, a natural force that can be used to fuel our growth and creativity. We are no longer divided between light and shadow, but whole, integrated, authentic, and alive. This section also emphasizes the idea of surrender, not surrendering to the shadow itself, but surrendering to the process of integration. Surrender is the act of letting go of resistance, of ceasing the endless battle between the self we want to be and the self we truly are. It is in this surrender that we find peace. We realize that we do not need to control every aspect of ourselves. We do not need to be perfect. We simply need to be whole. We conclude this section with a moment of quiet introspection. The person now stands before a mirror, their reflection no longer distorted by the fear and shame of their shadow. They see themselves clearly for the first time, not as an idealized version, but as a complete, multifaceted individual, capable of both darkness and light. This is the moment of peace, the moment of integration where the inner conflict dissolves and the individual is free to move forward into the world, no longer burdened by the weight of their repressed self. As the dust settles and the shadow is no longer something to run from, we come to a profound realization. True freedom is not the absence of darkness, but the harmony that arises when we allow both light and shadow to coexist within us. The struggle to become who we think we should be is over, and in its place is the acceptance of who we actually are. The pursuit of an idealized self, shaped by societal expectations and conditioned beliefs, fades into the background, and what emerges is something far more profound, the essence of our authentic, integrated self. This moment of integration is often the most elusive, because it requires us to let go of the very thing that has been driving us all our lives, the belief that we must be perfect. The paradox is that in order to truly live authentically, we must stop trying to live perfectly. This realization isn't just a mental shift, it's a visceral, emotional awakening. It's like a sudden wave of relief washing over us, a sense of peace in knowing that we no longer have to deny parts of ourselves to feel worthy. The act of integrating our shadow is not an instantaneous event. It's a process, a continuous unfolding. It's not about eradicating the darkness, but about learning how to coexist with it, to allow it to inform and guide us without letting it control us. And like any true transformation, it requires patience, self-compassion, and the willingness to sit with discomfort. There will be moments when we feel overwhelmed, moments when the weight of the shadow seems too heavy to bear. But those moments are also a part of the process, and they hold within them the potential for deeper growth. As we integrate our shadow, we begin to see ourselves in a new light. What once felt like our greatest weaknesses, our fears, our insecurities, our anger, become sources of power and wisdom. We no longer view them as flaws to be eradicated, but as the very building blocks of our authenticity. The integrated self is not a perfect self. It is a self that has learned to embrace imperfection, to see beauty in the cracks and crevices, in the places where the light has yet to shine. It is a self that is whole, not because it is flawless, but because it has learned to accept and love both the light and the shadow within. The journey of shadow integration also brings us to a new understanding of relationships, with others and with ourselves. When we no longer project our shadow onto the world around us, we begin to see others more clearly, not through the lens of our own unresolved issues, but with greater empathy and compassion. Our relationships become more authentic, because we are no longer looking for validation from others or trying to control them to fit our idealized image of who they should be. Instead, we are able to meet others as they are, whole and imperfect, just like ourselves. But integrating the shadow isn't just about inner peace or better relationships. It is also about reclaiming our personal power. The more we deny the parts of ourselves that we deem undesirable, the more energy we expend in maintaining that denial. We live in a constant state of tension, fighting against ourselves, repressing our feelings, and running from our truths. This depletion of energy leaves us feeling disconnected, exhausted, and drained. But when we learn to accept our shadow, we free up that energy to be used in more constructive ways, whether in our creative pursuits, in our work, or in our relationships. One of the most profound aspects of shadow integration is that it allows us to step into our full potential. When we embrace the totality of who we are, we tap into a wellspring of power that was always there, hidden beneath the surface. This power is not the power of domination or control. It is the power of authenticity, of living in alignment with our true selves. It is the power of accepting our flaws, our imperfections, and our vulnerabilities, and yet still standing tall, unshaken by the forces of the world. As we reflect on this process, we come to understand that the shadow is not a burden to bear, but a gift to be embraced. It holds within it the lessons we need to grow, the wisdom we need to heal, and the energy we need to create. The shadow is not something that diminishes us. It is something that empowers us. The darkness is not something to fear. It is something to illuminate. And when we allow ourselves to do so, we find that the light becomes brighter, more expansive, and more meaningful than it ever was before. It is important to note that shadow integration does not mean we become completely free from inner conflict or negative emotions. We will still face challenges, we will still feel moments of doubt, and we will still encounter the darker aspects of ourselves from time to time. But what changes is our relationship to those feelings. Instead of running from them, we learn to sit with them, to understand them, and to move through them. We realize that our shadows do not define us, but rather, they are part of the larger story of who we are. They are the chapters that, when integrated, complete the book of our lives. The integration process also involves a shift in perspective. No longer do we view ourselves as separate from the world, constantly battling against external forces. Instead, we begin to see the interconnectedness of all things, the light and the shadow, the inner and the outer, the self and the other. We understand that we are not alone in our struggles, that every person, every being, has their own shadow to contend with. This shared human experience creates a sense of unity, a sense of solidarity, where we can embrace the struggles of others as our own and offer compassion without judgment. Through this lens, the world itself becomes a mirror, a reflection of the light and shadow that exists within each of us. We are no longer trapped in the duality of right and wrong, good and bad, light and dark. Instead, we see the beauty in the contrasts, in the complexity of life. We realize that the greatest strength comes not from controlling or avoiding our shadows, but from allowing them to coexist with the light, to dance with it, to shape it into something greater than the sum of its parts. We end this journey with a final, profound realization. The integration of the shadow is not a destination, but a process, a lifelong journey of becoming, of unfolding into a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. The shadow will always be with us, but instead of fearing it, we can choose to walk alongside it, learning from it, growing with it. It is through this integration that we become fully alive, fully human, and fully ourselves. In the final moments, we circle back to the opening question. Can you integrate your shadow without losing your light? The answer is a resounding yes. The shadow does not diminish the light, it enhances it, making it more vibrant, more authentic, and more real. The light and the shadow are not opposites, they are partners, co-creators of the most profound and authentic expression of who we are. The final reflection leaves the audience with a timeless truth. The shadow is not a threat, but an invitation to live more fully, more authentically, and more powerfully. To walk with the shadow is to embrace the fullness of life, its beauty, its complexity, and its light. Only then can we truly say we are free.